Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 5 Minutes Podcast. Today, I like to talk about forecast, about analyzing things that will or may happen in the future. And why I want to talk about this? Because, we have a very misperception that many times comes from experts that, for example, if you read an economic newspaper and the economists say, the taxes will increase or decrease, or banks are solid or not solid. And we saw recently a Silicon Valley Bank collapse, and people say, this was predictable and this was not predictable. At the end, what I truly believe, and not just myself, many other people, that we can control much less than we think. We think we have control over many things, but in reality, what we can truly control, it's just a tiny fraction of the work we do and the projects we manage. And of course, when I say that, you will tell me, Ricardo, so then I don't need to do anything, right? I don't need to plan because you are telling me that I don't have a control. I will talk about that in a minute, but I just want to start by sharing with you what Philip Tetlock. Philip Tetlock is a Canadian-American political science writer and professor of the University of Pennsylvania. And he did a very deep study with, I would say, very disturbing conclusions. He researched around 30,000 predictions in many, many fields. And he used around 300 self-appointed professionals. Well, professionals that I'm economist, so I'm good on predict economy. I'm, weather forecaster, so I predict weather. And the results were, I would say, catastrophic. And they were just a bit better than a forecast generator, than a random number. And something like you flip a coin, and if it's heads or tails, basically it's the same thing than using an expert. And this makes us ask, so then what should we do to manage our projects and to manage this volatile environment? So I don't have a perfect answer, but I can share with you what I do. What I do is most of the time I use this forecast and these predictions, but I don't use them in absolute terms. I don't use them something like tomorrow it will rain, or tomorrow it will not rain, just to make a simple example. Why? Because when I have this affirmative forecast, it puts me in a quite big risk that this forecast will not become true. Better than that, I use scenario analysis. I do something like that. What if I have rain tomorrow? What's the damage? What is the problem I will have to face if this becomes true? Is it a wedding? It will destroy the wedding. What is the problem and the magnitude of the problem if that risk becomes real? And then I start preparing myself to adapt to different circumstances. Of course, I don't want it to rain. The weather forecast I look on the app is showing me it will not rain. However, there is a massive risk that this forecast is wrong. So what should I do if it rains? How do I prepare for that? So most of the time, I try to adapt myself to these different circumstances. Most of the time, I plan for 2, 3, 4 different scenarios. And of course, I have my favorite scenario where I will deliver the best value and the best results. But it cannot be something like all in. I cannot put everything on one bet and nothing on the other. Because if the risk becomes a reality, I'm done. It's like you putting all your money in a single investment. Because if you do that and something goes wrong, you are in deep trouble. So you need to diversify, right? And diversification is an answer to this kind of forecast. Because, for example, if you are 100% sure that a forecast will become a reality, you don't need to do that, right? You don't need. So you can just put everything in one pot. But systems are complex, and I already recorded an episode on that. So what is important? It's important that you have the ability to adapt to the different circumstances. So every time I'm managing a large project or a complex project, I always think about what I can do if this forecast is not confirmed. It's like the assumption we use in the project. If I have an assumption, every single forecast should be taken as an assumption with the proper level of risk, because otherwise it will become a big trouble if you rely on forecasts in such a volatile environment. And I want to finish this podcast mentioning J.K. Galbraith, John Kennedy Galbraith, Harvard economist, and he said that there are two types of forecasters: those who don't know and those who don't know they don't know. And this is very important in the current times we're living today, because many times projects are so impactful that you cannot rely on heads and tails while tossing a coin, because these can have traumatic results. You need to say, okay, I prefer heads, but if the flip of the coin comes tail, it will not be a tragedy for me. Think always about that, and see you next week with another 5 Minutes podcast.